It is recognized as the sole legitimate representative of the Palestinian people by over 100 states with which it holds diplomatic relations, and has enjoyed observer status at the United Nations since 1974. The PLO was considered by the United States and Israel to be a terrorist organization until the Madrid Conference in 1991. In 1993, the PLO recognized Israel's right to exist in peace, accepted UN Security Council resolutions 242 and 338, and rejected violence and terrorism. In response, Israel officially recognized the PLO as the representative of the Palestinian people. Founding. At its first summit meeting in Cairo in 1964, the Arab League initiated the creation of an organization representing the Palestinian people. The Palestinian National Council convened in Jerusalem on 28 May 1964. Concluding this meeting, the PLO was founded on 2 June 1964. Its stated goal was the liberation of Palestine through armed struggle. Ideology. The ideology of the PLO was formulated in the founding year 1964 in the Palestinian National Covenant. The document is a combative anti-Zionist statement dedicated to the restoration of the Palestinian homeland. It has no reference to religion. In 1968, the charter was replaced by a comprehensively revised version. Until 1993, the only promoted option was armed struggle. From the signing of the Oslo Accords, negotiation and diplomacy became the only official policy. In April 1996, a large number of articles, which were inconsistent with the Oslo Accords, were wholly or partially nullified. The basic idea in the PLO's ideology is that Zionists had unjustly expelled the Palestinians from Palestine and established a Jewish state in place, under the pretext of having historic and Jewish ties with Palestine. They demanded that Palestinian refugees should be allowed to return to their homes. This is expressed in the National Covenant. Article 2 of the Charter states that Palestine, with the boundaries it had during the British Mandate, is an indivisible territorial unit, meaning that there is no place for a Jewish state. This article was adapted in 1996 to meet the Oslo Accords. Article 20 states, "The Balfour Declaration, the mandate for Palestine, and everything that has been based upon them, are deemed null and void. Claims of historical or religious ties of Jews with Palestine are incompatible with the facts of history and the true conception of what constitutes statehood. Judaism, being a religion, is not an independent nationality, nor do Jews constitute a single nation with an identity of its own. They are citizens of the states to which they belong." This article was nullified in 1996. Article 3 reads, "The Palestinian Arab people possess the legal right to their homeland and have the right to determine their destiny after achieving the liberation of their country in accordance with their wishes and entirely of their own accord and will." The PLO has always, above all, the Palestinian people labeled as Arabs. This was a natural consequence of the fact that the PLO was an offshoot of the Arab League. It also has a tactical element, as to keep the backing of Arab states. Over the years, the Arab identity remained the stated nature of the Palestinian state. It is a reference to the Arab state envisioned in the UN partition plan. Secular versus Islamic. The PLO and its dominating faction Fatah are often contrasted to more religious-orientated factions like Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. All, however, represent a predominant Muslim population. Practically the whole population of the territories is Muslim, most of them Sunni. Only some 50,000 of the 4.6 million Palestinians in the opt is Palestinian Christian, whereas roughly 120,000–130,000 live in Israel and the vast majority in the diaspora, chosen by the Palestinian people as the highest authority in the PLO, and an executing government, elected by the PLO. PNC. In practice, however, the organization was rather a hierarchic one with a military-like character, needed for its function as liberation organization, the Liberation of Palestine. Beside a Palestinian National Charter, which describes the ideology of the PLO, a constitution, named Fundamental Law, was adopted, which dictates the inner structure of the organization and the representation of the Palestinian people. A draft constitution was written in 1963. To rule the PLO until free general elections among all the Palestinians in all the countries in which they resided could be held. The constitution was revised in 1968. Institutions: the Palestinian National Council has 740 members and the Executive Committee or EXCO has 18 members. The Palestinian Central Council or CC or PCC, established by the PNC in 1973, is the second leading body of the PLO. The CC consists of 124 members from the PLO Executive Committee, PNC, PLC and other Palestinian organizations. The EC includes 15 representatives of the PLC. The CC functions as an intermediary body between the PNC and the EC. The CC makes policy decisions when PNC is not in session, acting as a link between the PNC and the PLO-EC. The CC is elected by the PNC and chaired by the PNC Speaker. The PNC serves as the parliament for all Palestinians inside and outside of the occupied Palestinian territory, including Jerusalem. The PLO is governed internally by its fundamental law, which describes the powers and the relations between the organs of the PLO. Ahmad Shukri was the first chairman of the PLO Executive Committee from 1964 to 1967. In 1967, he was replaced by Yahya Hamida. Yasser Arafat occupied the function from 1969 until his death in 2004. He was succeeded by Mahmoud Abbas. According to an internal PLO document, the current PNC remains in function if elections are not possible. In absence of elections, most of the members of the PNC are appointed by the Executive Committee. The document further states that the PNC represents all sectors of the Palestinian community worldwide, including numerous organizations of the resistance movement, political parties. Challenged representation. As of 2015, there have not been elections for many years, neither for the PNC, nor for the EC, the PCC and the President of the State of Palestine. The Executive Committee has formally 18 members, including its chairman, but in past years many vacant seats in the executive remained empty. Moreover, Hamas, the largest representative of the inhabitants of the Palestinian territories alongside Fatah, is not represented in the PLO at all. The results of the last parliamentary elections for the PLC, held in the territories in 2006, with Hamas as the big winner while not even a member of the PLO, underlined the clear lack of a popular mandate by the PLO leadership. According to PASSIA, individual elected members of the PLC representing Hamas, however, are automatically members of the PNC. The representative status of the PLO is often challenged in the past. It was, for example, doubted in 2011 by a group of Palestinian lawyers, jurists and legal scholars, due to lack of elections. They questioned the PLO's legitimacy to alter the status and role of the organization in respect of their status within the UN. They demanded for immediate and direct elections to the Palestine National Council to activate representative PLO institutions in order to preserve, consolidate, and strengthen the effective legal representation of the Palestinian people as a whole, before changing the status within the UN. PLO vs. BAR. The 1993–1995 Oslo Accords deliberately detached the Palestinian population in the occupied Palestinian territories from the PLO and the Palestinians in exile, by creating a Palestinian Authority for the territories. A separate parliament and government were established. Mahmoud Abbas was one of the architects of the Oslo Accords. Although many in the PLO opposed the Oslo Agreements, the Executive Committee and the Central Council approved the accords. It marked the beginning of the PLO's decline, as the PA came to replace the PLO as the prime Palestinian political institution. Political factions within the PLO that had opposed the Oslo process were marginalized. Only during the Hamas-led PA government in 2006-2007, the PLO resurfaced. After Hamas had taken over Gaza in 2007, Abbas issued a decree suspending the PLC and SIM sections of the Palestinian Basic Law, and appointing Salam Fayyad as prime minister. The PLO managed to overcome the separation by keeping the power in PLO and PA in one hand, upheld by Yasser Arafat. In 2002, Arafat held the functions chairman of the PLO Executive Committee and chairman of Fatah, the dominating faction within the PLO, as well as president of the Palestinian National Authority. He also controlled the Palestinian National Security Forces. Internal politics. On 4 February 1969, Fatah founder Arafat was elected chairman of the PLO in Cairo. Since, Fatah has been the dominant factor within the PLO, which still continues in 2015, under pressure from the international community led by Israel and US, and from inside his own party Fatah. Arafat partially transferred some of his strongly centralized power in 2003, causing strong tensions within the Palestinian leadership. Arafat appointed Mahmoud Abbas as prime minister, but this resulted in disputes about the transfer of tasks and responsibilities. Abbas was strongly supported by the US and the international community, because he was supposed to be more willing to give far-reaching concessions to Israel, while Arafat had retained most of his power and a power struggle within Fatah continued. The leadership was criticized for corruption and nepotism. After Arafat's death, Abbas increasingly gained exclusive powers within both PLO and PA as well as in Fatah, until he had acquired the same power as previously Arafat. Critics say that Abbas even got more powers than Arafat. Abbas is criticized for his autocratic rule and refusal to share powers and plans with other Palestinians. In the absence of a functioning parliament and executive, he even began to issue his own laws. Senior representative of Abbas' Fatah faction and former Fatah Minister of Prisoner Affairs Sufyan Abu Zaida complained that Abbas appointed himself as the chief judge and prosecutor, making a mockery of the Palestinian judicial system. There appeared reports of widespread corruption and nepotism within the Palestinian Authority. Only Hamas-ruled Gaza has a more or less functioning parliament. 2015 struggle for power with a de facto defunct parliament and executive. Mahmoud Abbas increasingly gained exclusive powers within both PLO and PA as well as in Fatah. After the announcement in August 2015 of Abbas' resignation as chairman of the Executive Committee and of 9 other members as well, many Palestinians of the political scene saw the move as just an attempt to replace some members in the Executive Committee, or to force a meeting of the PNC and remain in their jobs until the PNC decides whether to accept or to reject their resignations. Met with fierce criticism by many Palestinian factions, a session of the PNC, who had to approve the resignations, was postponed indefinitely. Political status. The Palestine Liberation Organization is recognized by the Arab League as the sole and legitimate representative of the Palestinian people, and by the United Nations as the representative of the Palestinian people. The PLO was designated a terrorist organization by the United States in 1987. But in 1988 a presidential waiver was issued which permitted contact with the organization. Most of the rest of the world recognized the PLO as the legitimate representatives of the Palestinian people from the mid-1970s onwards. Israel considered the PLO to be a terrorist organization until the Madrid Conference in 1991. In 1993, PLO chairman Yasser Arafat recognized the State of Israel in an official letter to its Prime Minister, Yitzhak Rabin. In response to Arafat's letter, Israel decided to revise its stance toward the PLO and to recognize the organization as the representative of the Palestinian people. This led to the signing of the Oslo Accords in 1993. Status at the United Nations observer status. The United Nations General Assembly recognized the PLO as a representative of the Palestinian people in Resolution 3210 and Resolution 3236, and granted the PLO observer status on the 22nd of November 1974 in Resolution 3237. On the 12th of January 1976, the UN Security Council voted 11-1 with 3 abstentions to allow the Palestinian Liberation Organization to participate in a Security Council debate without voting rights, a privilege usually restricted to UN member states. It was admitted as a full member of the Asia Group on 2 April 1986. After the Palestinian Declaration of Independence, the PLO's representation was renamed Palestine. On 7 July 1998, this status was extended to allow participation in General Assembly debates, though not in voting. 2011 application for UN state membership. When President Mahmoud Abbas submitted an application for UN state membership in September 2011, Palestinian lawyers, jurists and legal scholars expressed their concern that the change of Palestine's status in the UN could have negative implications on the legal position of the Palestinian people. They warned for the risk of fragmentation, where the state of Palestine would represent the people within the UN and the PLO represent the people outside the UN. The latter including the Palestinians in exile, where refugees constitute more than half of the Palestinian people. They were also afraid of the loss of representation of the refugees in the UN. In Resolution 67 19th of November 2012, Palestine was at last awarded non-member observer state status, but the General Assembly maintained the status of the PLO non-member observer state status by September 2012, with their application for full membership stalled due to the inability of Security Council members to make a unanimous recommendation. The PLO had decided to pursue an upgrade in status from observer entity to non-member observer state. On 29 November 2012, Resolution 67 19th passed, upgrading Palestine to non-member observer state status in the United Nations. The new status equates Palestine's with that of the Holy See. Diplomatic representation. The Palestine Information Office was registered with the Justice Department of the United States as a foreign agent until 1968. When it was closed, it was reopened in 1989 as the Palestine Affairs Center. The PLO Mission Office in Washington, D.C. was opened in 1994, and represented the PLO in the United States. On 20 July 2010, the United States Department of State agreed to upgrade the status of the PLO mission in the United States to General Delegation of the PLO.